So tonight we have with us an amazing panel, and I'd like to just take a minute and introduce our panel. And actually, before I introduce my panel, I would like to thank the members of the Board of Education that are here, our President Naomi Hoffman, and oh my gosh, I just totally went blank. I'm just so embarrassed. No, I know. Tom, no. I knew last name, it took me a minute with first name. Tom Templeton, who's one of our board members, and I think that's it that I see of board members. And then our superintendent, Dr. Robinson, who is with us tonight. We actually, coming in right now, we have a couple more of our board members, Petra Holden and Deanna Stevenson in the back. So thank you very much for being here. Our school resource officers are here as well, and the lieutenant from the Sheriff's Department are in the back with us. Our board members, or our panel members, Ron Agostinoni, who is our building principal over at High School East, but again, he's also presenting with me. We have Derek Teft, who is here on the end. Derek is a community educator with Saratoga Center for the Family. We have a great partnership with Saratoga Center for the Family. They are our mental health provider here in district. And Derek is here tonight to talk about some social media and some tips for our parents. We have Phil Barrett, who is our Town of Clifton Park Town Supervisor. Again, a very active member of the community and somebody who we have a very good partnership with and work very closely with. We have Jeffrey Hunter, who is on the end. Jeffrey is the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI. And we also have Charlie Keller, who is the Supervisor Special Agent with Joint Terrorism Task Force of the FBI. And we welcome you all here. And again, I thank you so much for your participation. It's absolutely imperative that we have this partnership and we have these conversations. So thank you again for being here. So as we begin, again, a few people have come in. Just to let you know, just be aware of where the fire exits are as you come in. In the event we need to exit for any reason. So this graphic is a graphic that we have been sharing and have shared for several years now in the district, and this is representative of our various prongs of safety here in the district. And this, if you've been to any of the other safety series, we've shared this diagram, we've talked about it in depth, and there's the panel discussion will go into these three components again tonight. As we go through the questions of preparation and preparedness they will be addressing, response and mitigation, and recovery. And the school safety is a multi-pronged approach. Tonight, the panel will address the respective components that you see there of the district safety plan from their varying perspectives. We have Saratoga Center for the Family, a community-based program. We have town supervisor from our community, and we have the FBI here as well. There will be ample opportunities will be provided for questions and answers if people have questions. And we want this to be a growth opportunity for everyone, recognizing that safety is indeed everyone's responsibility. So tonight our focus is on situational awareness, and that is situational awareness at school, at home, and in the community as well. It's, again, we talk about safety being a multi-pronged approach. Situational awareness needs to be looked at from a multi-pronged approach. We like to focus on what happens when someone sees something, but second guess what they are seeing. Their attention becomes distorted from existing situational awareness factors, so ultimately the individual does not expect the threat. So tonight we hope to bring a little bit more light about what situational awareness is and what to be aware of when you're in school, when you're at home, or in the community. We all need everyone to serve as our eyes and our ears. They are in a better position to identify behavior and activities that are out there, that are out of the ordinary in their residence, their school, and their community. Being aware of what is happening. It's everyone's responsibility to be aware of what's happening out there. It's all of our responsibility. Diversity of thoughts through all of the different perspectives that the panel is going to provide, and establishing rapport with the public and encouraging community engagement is a great step towards identifying and preventing future incidents from happening. When we talk about situational awareness, it is about what you see around you and being aware of who's around you and what is happening. As many of you heard me right from the beginning talk about being aware of our exits. Are you aware of the person sitting next to you? Are you aware who's behind you? Are you aware of different things as you walked in, as you walked down the hall? Did you see anything unusual? When you left your home today, did you notice anything out of the ordinary? So when you think about the different situations you're in, you want to have the ability to recognize, be alert of what's going on. You want to be able to assess that, and then you want to be able to respond to that. So tonight, again, we're going to be talking about the situational awareness in school, in home, in the community, and it really is about taking a coordinated, comprehensive approach and really bringing the community together. Parents, our community partnerships that we have in the community, our businesses. It's bringing everyone together and having those conversations and really always having safety on the forefront of what we're doing and talking about why we're doing what we're doing, and then the how and the what come behind that. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron to talk a little bit about the really how the school is really the hub of our community.
So I think Becky's going to put a graphic, and you'll see, right, we say, for us at least, we're the center of the community, and a few examples when we talk about safety and what is helpful to us is working with businesses, community partners. Dr. Robinson, a couple weeks ago, put a meeting together, Supervisor Barrett was there, and we met with these businesses, and when we think about safety, we're thinking about like on the grand scale, what gets us like newsworthy attention, but safety is a lot of different things. For an example, the YMCA called us the other day, there was an issue there with some students. Typical issue, teens have issues with, they let us know. We're able to prevent something from happening in school. Now, would it have been on a new, was it a grand event? Probably not, but that's safety too. We've heard from businesses, hey, one of your students works here, someone showed up, something happened. Oh, well, we didn't realize, now we can get involved, we can get our SRO involved. So that kind of ecosystem put up there is really important when we have families telling us things, and we have a system when that kind of information comes in. So we move forward with information we get. And Becky, if you just want to jump forward, maybe I should move and do it.
No, I got it.
So the next slide is just going to, I don't think this is anything new or something you don't know, right? Most kids have a smartphone. I think that's probably low, 95% of students. That's actually probably is, because it's 2022. And gaming consoles. So if you jump to the next one, Becky, this is really the focus when we're talking about this, and I know we have someone who's going to specialize in social media for us, but we have to know what our kids are doing, because most of the stuff that happens in school isn't because of something that took place or started in school. It's students that are on their Xbox or on their PlayStation. We get a ton of social media posts. Well, that's private. Well, it's not private because I have it, right? Well, you can't see that's private. No, I have it. So there's that kind of stuff. And I got to tell you, all those posts we see that cause problems, they never happen before 11 p.m. Right? I used to be told that nothing good happens after midnight, wherever that saying was, right? Same thing with social media. So we ask questions like, do we know, or do people know when their kids are online? Are their phones in the room with them? Do their phones shut off? Do you use family sharing? Like those kind of things are important to monitor our kids, because you'd be surprised, and there's something coming up later, the number of hours kids spend a day, 8, 9, 10 hours a day on their phone. You'd be surprised how many kids are on their phone all night long. So it's an academic issue, correct, right? They're tired, and like I said, a lot of good things aren't being said at that time of night. Other things you notice up there, community safety. oftentimes when there's an issue in school, middle school, high school, maybe elementary too, but a lot of times middle school, high school, well, why did this happen? Well, at the mall, or at the skate park, or at the, like, it's not just here. Or if something happens at the mall, it's, well, in school this happened. So it's that whole thing, that back and forth. And then how safe are homes? Like, how are your guns stored if you own guns? Where are they locked up? Is ammunition separate? Those kind of things. Then prescription drugs, we know, can be an issue with teens. How are those stored? Alcohol, those type of things we'll probably get into.
So we talk a little bit, you heard me talk a little bit about second guessing what we see. And when we see something, we encourage everyone to say something. And sometimes people sit back and they start second guessing. Did I really see that? Did that really happen? And sometimes people don't expect what they saw to become a threat, and sometimes they don't even know the history behind it. So we're going to talk a little bit about threat tonight, and some of the questions that I'm going to ask of the panel have to do with threat. So before we go on any further, you see there at the bottom of the slide, it talks about reporting is the key. And you are our eyes and ears at home. Parents are, you are such a huge piece in what is happening, and also in the community. And as Ron spoke, we have an amazing partnership with a lot of people out there in the community. And we have come together to start talking about how can we, as a community, work together to ensure that we are doing everything we can to reduce any potential risks of, threats that are happening or particular situations that may continue to get elevated. How can we decrease that? So again, I need to stress, it really is a partnership, and it takes a village, as we all say, and it's all of our responsibility. So as we get into some of our questions, Mr. Agostinone, can you talk about what steps the high school and other administrators take in the district when it comes to preparing for and preventing threats in our school?
So obviously there's a lot of training, and what's good is, I'll talk from the high school perspective, but our approach is systematic K-12. So if you were talking to Robin Gower, who's the principal of this building, she would say some similar stuff. Might be tailored a little different to the age of students. We do a lot of training. A lot of that comes from New York State. You're going to do these number of drills, so students get training, faculty and staff get training. We try to put ourselves in that safety mindset. You saw the graphic up there, like red, black. We try to put ourselves in there because we don't always live in that, but we try to put ourselves in those situations. So we do a lot of tabletop type exercises. We sit around and say, okay, if this was to happen, what would the reaction be? And then we throw some curveballs with what's going on within the building. And then we take something out. Okay, well, Becky was going to do this. Becky's not here today. So who's the next person? So it is that systematic approach, and we talk about things we do as a team, as an administrative team, as a faculty. We work with our faculty and staff during meetings to make sure they understand their role and responsibility if there was an emergency at all levels.
Thank you. Mr. Keller, what role does the FBI have in the local community when it comes to preparing for and preventing terroristic threats to schools or local communities? Please share some specific examples if you can.
Sure. Can everyone hear me without the mic? Is that okay? Okay, great. That's a whole nother thing. But so I'll start with what we're not. So we're not first responders, at least in the physical sense, right? Your first responders here at Shen are your school resource officers, mostly in the back there, right? And then the New York State Police. Those are the first responders in the physical sense. So if there's really an issue that's here, that's ongoing, these guys are the ones that are responding. What we do is we're a resource. We're a resource for the community to be able to reach back and to our local law enforcement partners through the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which I supervise, and several other task forces, the Cyber Task Force, etc., that we have at the FBI. We cover a vast area in FBI Albany. For those that don't know, we cover south to Ulster County, west to Ithaca, north to the Canadian border, and the entire state of Vermont. So what we get there is, what a lot of people also don't know, is that we're a domestic intelligence agency. So for the United States, we're a domestic intelligence agency that intakes all the information. The reason I bring that up is because you see a lot of things here in the local community through the county or through the state, but what we see is the national picture. So a lot of times we're able to kind of put the threat picture or the ongoing things that we're seeing through swatting and everything else, we're able to piece it together through our offices, through our coordination with our local partners and our national partners and sometimes international partners to make an impact. A lot of the other things that we do in terms of actual preparedness is similar to what you guys mentioned, is we do tabletop exercises. So we do that pretty regularly. Last year we did one with RPI with our locals. We also did one with a bunch of the chiefs of police and the U.S. Attorney's Office and District Attorney's Office. We do outreach events like this, community outreach, and we do special events. So we did the World Games, University Games, or any kind of big event, whether it's at SPAC or wherever it may be where there's a potential threat. One of the things I wanted to let everyone know here is kind of with this see something, say something when it comes to preparation. And we prepare through that with the tabletop exercises and all the other things, but targeted violence is highly individual based on unique motivators, and targeted attacks are targeted. They don't just happen, right? There's a lot of preparation behind it. They have a grievance that they're taking time to consider, plan, and prepare an attack. That takes a lot of time to plan, and it also gives us an opportunity to see something, say something, and everything else that Shen here has already created. A stat that a lot of folks don't know is that 81%, according to research, 81% of school shooters told at least one person prior to the event. 59% of the school shooters told 2 or more people prior to the event. So there's a lot of time for those bystanders or the parents in the community and other things to see something, and then we can respond from there, together with our local partners.
Mr. Keller, I would want to go back to one thing that you said, because you mentioned a word that we all became familiar with last week or 2 weeks ago, swatting. And for some people, they may not understand or know that definition. Can you just give us a quick definition of what swatting is?
Sure, so swatting, and Jeff, please correct me on the exact definition with it, but generally speaking, swatting is something that actually started like as soon as telephones were invented. People would call in bomb threats or whatever it may be to cause mass chaos and confusion through different things. Now it's much more technical, and you have, as has been all over the news and everything else, you have several ways that people can message people or schools a threat at the same time through, whether it be voice IPs, VPNs, emails, spamming different areas. And they do school threats, bomb threats, community threats, any of those things. I know you can weigh in a little bit more on the exact.
I think it's well said. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
It's technical, so I'm gonna.
So, Mr. Hunter, with that, do you, as the FBI, work directly with local school administrators or state and local law enforcement when it comes to preparing for and preventing terroristic threats to schools or local communities?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think, historically the easy answer would have been, of course we're working with our local and state law enforcement partners, and we can go back to the relationship we have with them. But to address the first part of the question, local school administrators. Historically, those relationships we might have managed through the school resource officers or personal one-off relationships. But by virtue of us being here tonight, and prior to being here, we were over at BOCES speaking with a larger audience related to swatting and school threats. And we're coming to recognize the value of having direct one-on-one relationships with school administrators due to multiple reasons, one of which is the sophistication of the threats that we're facing. So we see a myriad of threat actors operating across the country and the world, because the FBI has representatives in every, well, not in every country, but in many countries around the world and in every state in the United States. And as we're looking at these various threat actors who are potentially sending the threats from different states or other countries that are coming into the Albany capital region, the FBI is best positioned to try to respond and mitigate and hold those individuals responsible. And by having those direct relationships with school administrators, we're able to have open lines of communication and receive the information that we need in a timely manner. In many instances, the timeliness of the information that we receive is paramount to identifying the actor. So we're all aware and following in the news, and we may have, and I love the analogy, nothing good happens after 11, and we see that, and my phone rings at 2 a.m. often because somebody is on Discord or Twitter, and those individuals at times are easier for us to find one-off students who maybe we use the term, they're pulling the fire alarm, and they're doing it for their own selfish reasons related to something that's going on at school or some type of vendetta towards a teacher or an administrator or a friend. But we also have individuals who are making threats into this area, and they're using Tor browser, and they're using VPNs, and they're hiding their identity through numerous sophisticated technological advances, if you will. And that's when it's paramount to have the early discussions so we can try to track those individuals and ensure that they don't pose a threat. So we're building out those relationships, I would say, now with school administrators and teachers. And we rely on our existing relationships with our local law enforcement and state law enforcement partners. And we're sharing our resources, whether it be technological or human resources, to ensure that we are mitigating any threats to schools.
Thank you, thank you. Supervisor Barrett, how do you see local towns can better work with the FBI or even state and local law enforcement to prepare and plan for effectively addressing a terroristic threat to a school or community?
Well, I think communication and coordination are extremely important with any preparations, and certainly that is the case when we're talking about trying to prevent a terrible incident that may happen at our schools or in our community. And every jurisdictional organization, such as the ones represented here, myself as a town supervisor and a member of the County Board of Supervisors. I serve on 2 legislative bodies. These gentlemen from the FBI, we have a community partner here from Saratoga Center. We all have different standard operating procedures, resources, and expertise. These gentlemen just spoke of the very large area that they cover. Well, they can't possibly know everything about every single community that they serve. At the town, we can provide that intel and resources very quickly. So if something were to happen or was suspected of possibly going to happen, and these gentlemen came to me and said, we need A, B, C, and D, we need to know the geography of the area. We need to know, we need some first responders here, law enforcement, fire department, EMS. Where's the best place to deploy certain assets? And just general information about the area and where to find the resources they need to do their job. And that's a main role that we can play. Because obviously we know the community, I know who to call, whatever the case may be, at any time of the day that we play on the local level in working in concert with the FBI and other law enforcement and obviously the school.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Taff, what impact do you see social media playing, both positive and negative, when it comes to working with students and parents?
I think, can everyone hear me okay? I think outside of, terroristic threats, there's a lot of issues that we need to consider when it comes to internet and social media safety. I think social media gets a bad rep sometimes, but there's also a lot of positive things. So I think it's easy to kind of get bogged down in paranoid based on what you see that's going on in social media. So I think finding a balance is really important. Some of the positives though, social media, think of even when the pandemic started, how many services can be delivered now through technology that weren't available before, and it's reaching a lot of different people. It can create opportunities for people to feel connected, especially our youth. I think for a lot of us growing up, going to the mall was where we felt connected. Not really the case anymore. Social media is where our youth are feeling more connected. Social media is the new mall. Quick access to information and resources, be it for knowledge, entertainment, or safety purposes, and outlets for self-expression. So there's a lot of good things, but there's a lot of negative things, when you think about the impact it has on development for kids, their mental health, less physical activity, less time going outside, more time being spent on screens. It can impact their social emotional development. I think especially these last 2 years, the pandemic has exacerbated that. When we had to isolate and shut down orders, we were seeing less of people. Social media is also playing a role in that. I think a lot of youth and even adults want to spend more time. They'd rather stay at home and text their friends or FaceTime rather than go out and actually do something. I mean, I felt that way a couple of times. It's just easier. It can impact sleep habits. It can impact their exposure to inappropriate content, especially the more time kids are spending online. There's an increased risk of them being exposed to potentially harmful or unsafe things. I also think, and this kind of goes both ways for positive and negative, and we've talked a little bit about this, is the power of bystanders. When we see something that makes us feel unsafe or uncomfortable, I would encourage everyone to report that, right? Use the reporting features on that app or that device. But when it comes to kids, taking it a step further too, and encouraging them to also report it to a safe adult, because there are certain situations that's warranted to really make sure everyone is being safe. But on the other hand, the power of bystanders, when other people think, oh, someone else is going to report it, or they just ignore it because they think it's a false threat. I think regardless if we think it's false or true or whatever, especially our kids need to know to report that. So.
Thank you. So I'm going to continue with you for a second and move into that response and mitigation. So how can parents monitor their students' social media or digital footprint, and maybe define what digital footprint means?
So a digital footprint is basically our trail that we leave behind on the internet. Everybody who uses the internet has a digital footprint. There's active ways to contribute to your digital footprint. When you're making purchases, it could be posting on social media, airing out your laundry and complaining about your neighbor or relatives, whatever, posting pictures, images. There's also passive ways that our digital footprint can grow. That's cookies. So when we visit websites can track our data if we allow access. There are sometimes where we don't have that choice, and websites and apps are just automatically looking at our data. So basically our digital footprint is our life online, and some people are aware and some people are not aware. I think especially for our kids, they're still growing. Their brains aren't fully developed until late teens, early 20s, late 20s for males, unfortunately. They need to be reminded constantly that not only do the choices they make in person have consequences, short-term and long-term, choices that we make online can also have short and long-term consequences. And it doesn't just go away just because you can't see it, doesn't mean it's there. It'll always stick with you. And we see that a lot. Think about the last decade. Celebrities, athletes, politicians, teachers, coaches, actors, whoever, musicians have made poor choices on the internet a long time ago, and now it's catching back up with them. And they're losing jobs, careers, scholarships. So that's a digital footprint. As far as how to monitor, we get this question a lot. What's the best app out there to monitor my kids' screen time? Unfortunately, there's no one good app that's going to catch everything. Technology isn't perfect. Things will slip through the cracks. There are some good apps out there, but honestly, I think the best monitor is yourself as a parent. I know it's a lot. I know we're busy. We've got dinner. We've got this meeting. We've got that meeting. We're on the PTA. We've got to bring our kids to practice. Got to go shopping. Life gets busy, but when we leave technology unsupervised to our kids, that's when these risks start to become a problem. And kids only know what they're taught, right? So if we're not talking to our kids about how to handle potentially unsafe situation that they find online, whether it's someone else posting, be what it may, they might not be sure how to handle it. And I think oftentimes parents, we assume that, oh, my kids will know how to do that, but we can't always assume. So as far as monitoring, you know, I could spend the whole night talking about all the apps and stuff that are out there. If you do want to stay after and chat, I'd be happy to share some of those with you. But unfortunately, our apps aren't going to catch everything. You know, I think, you know, there's one app, I think it's called Bark, is really great. There's one thing as far as filtering content. If they see a text message with a word in it that you don't want, like drugs or something, it will flag that and can alert you. But technology is always changing. Kids are savvy. They might figure out, okay, then how do I use an emoji to talk about what I'm thinking about right now? And the apps might not be able to pick up with that changing technology, that changing slang. So it has to be a combination of both, right? It's going to take some effort from both sides.
Thank you, thank you. And I just want to point out, as a district, our Student Support Center at the high school as well as the middle school has recently published a Instagram, Instagram, I should say, again, appropriate technology. And on that, they have included some of the apps, which actually we got at a presentation about what the different apps are, and I believe we also may have some of that information out on the table that's outside the auditorium there about, you know, what those apps are, what they're for, and what to be aware of. Mr. Agostinoni, I'm going to turn to you. What step does the high school, or again, other administrators, and we're talking about response and mitigation at this point, take when they hear about or have been notified about a potential serious threat to the school?
So it's not left to chance, right? We have a process and protocols in place when they come in. Just for, so if we get a potential threat that comes in, two groups are notified right away. One would be our superintendent. Because if you think about it, if something happens at the high school, the incident command structure for the high school might default to the district office because we might not be able to run the incident because whatever happened there. So one is to notify the superintendent, of course, we would do that. And two, he might be taking over what's happening at the high school because we might not be able to. And then we work with our school resource officers because they have a wealth of knowledge, and then they can bump it up the chain. So as we get something that comes in that we think is a threat, consult with our district, consult with our school resource officers, who then can go to their lieutenant, can go to their investigators if needed. And then we have a threat assessment protocol. So depending on the nature of the threat, we follow the threat assessment protocol that came from the Secret Service, and we'll go through that process. One of our support counselors here, she's sat in a number of threat assessment protocol meetings, and we'll go through that. And there's a screener, and that could lead to a long form, and we go through that process. So depending on the level of severity of the threat or the level of risk based on the team that is there are things that are put in place to ensure it's mitigated and to ensure we do right by whatever the person making the threat is and make sure that person gets the assistance they need should that be needed. So that happens in every building. It's not just the high school. It's a process that we have as a district. It's pretty systematic to kind of run through that process.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Hunter, do you work directly with state or local law enforcement when the FBI receives a complaint about a potential serious threat at a school?
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about a serious threat, and we also like to use the term credible threat. So we may receive what we deem to be a serious threat, and the first thing that we're going to do is reach out to our state and local partners and start trying to determine the credibility of the threat. And something that's been said here, but certainly worth making abundantly clear, you know, we do receive serious threats that we're working with state and local partners to immediately determine credibility. But in the event that you have information potentially related to a serious or credible threat, your first call should be to your state and local first responder partners, and then we will work with them to help mitigate the threat. So it's always worth re-highlighting that. But as we look at a recent potential serious threat that came into the FBI first within the past month, we have direct reach to our what we call task force officers who are embedded in the FBI on our Safe Streets Task Force and on our Joint Terrorism Task Force. And those representatives span almost all of the state, local, and county agencies within the capital region. So immediately we're making contact with them to notify them of the serious threat. They're reaching into the backroom investigators for the state police in the affected area. And then we're using those established relationships to get in touch with, one, the superintendent, and to the school resource officer. So we've now made the initial notifications. We then have our intelligence analysts working immediately, and none of these threats come in between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. They come in between 11 and 5. But we immediately have people start working up the information that we have. We have agents that are responding to meet with our state and local partners. And as the intelligence is coming in, as the agents and officers are moving towards the potential threat, we're making a determination as to how we're going to handle that. And in this instance, it was knocking on somebody's door, waking somebody up at 6 a.m. The school was already aware. We gained consent to speak with the individual who we believed sent the threatening message, and we deemed the threat to not be credible. So that's generally how we work in the event that we receive a serious complaint, assuming that our state and local partners did not receive it before us.
Thank you. Supervisor Baird, what role do you see the town playing in a situation involving a serious threat to the school?
Well, as a town and county representative, as I mentioned before, we have a lot of resources that we can deploy and help with, across the board, and I think that is the largest role that we can play. In addition to the communication, and through the pandemic, there were certain programs that we had in place, and we worked with Shen on those programs. We re-engaged on some of those items as we came out of the pandemic, which again will further that communication and coordination that I mentioned prior. And we have great law enforcement assets here in Saratoga County. As a town, we provide free space at our public safety building at Exit 9 for the state police. They have 25, 30 individuals working there in Clifton Park. In the back of the room here, we have some of our great sheriff deputies, and we continually add to what they're capable, giving them more resources, more positions working throughout the county. The SRO program, I was very proud to be part of the group that started that initiative at the county. I think it's been a wonderful program, and it's continued to grow. Shen embraced it right away. Another sign of a great partnership between the county, town, and Shen. So I want to commend Dr. Robinson and his team for embracing that program. Not every district has embraced it, but it has continued to grow. But I think a lot of the issues that are created are all about attention. There's certain individuals that want attention. So those fights that might be planned in the school that happen at a town park, a lot of times they're on video, and then the video spreads viral throughout social media. It's all about attention. And I think I have 3 kids over 20. So I know how difficult, you can't watch your kids every second of the day. I understand that. But if you have good conversations with them, and I'm sure a lot of you do, you can learn a heck of a lot. You can learn who is creating issues, who are the people that could be a threat to them or has threatened them or their friends. You can get a wealth of information just talking to your kids very casually, and sometimes that information can be helpful to the school, to the town. I'll give you a quick example, and this has never happened until just recently. Obviously in the springtime on the Common, we have a lot of work to do, as you might imagine. And while our crews are out there working, all of a sudden this person walks their dog a couple times a day and is constantly taking pictures of our people working. And they reported it back to me, and I said, well, if they're just taking pictures, obviously I know that's a little disconcerting, but just get a picture of the automobile, get a picture of the person, document it. It's very important to document information, because if you document information and then report something to me, to the FBI, to the school, that is extremely helpful to see what if there's a trend or a course of action that's happening, no matter what the behavior is that's concerning you. But then just recently, when we had that hot weather, everybody's got their windows down in the truck, in their car, and our crew was pulling out in a pickup truck, stop at the intersection at the Common, and this gentleman driving by and starts screaming at them. And they're not sure why. He arrives at the Common in an automobile, so obviously he doesn't live contiguous to the Common, I don't think. Very, very interesting situation, but you just never know. So it's very important to document that information, so that way if we do have to report it to local law enforcement, we have a pattern of information, and we can say, yes, we have this concern, and here's a whole bunch of information. And that's extremely important. So I would just really encourage parents, talk to their kids casually about what's going on. You'll learn a ton. But a lot of times it comes down to attention, as these gentlemen just talked about the statistics, where before shootings happen, they're telling people. And I know it's human nature to think, well, I'm sure they don't mean it. It wouldn't happen here, right? But nobody thinks it's going to happen in their town. So any information like that can be helpful. I know it can be uncomfortable to make that step to report that kind of information, but it is important to be proactive.
So we have a question right
Yeah, I just had a question on, I heard what you were saying about the FBI not being first responders, but I just wanted to clarify. If there was an incident, like not a threat, but an actual incident occurring, would the FBI respond, or would it be a simply state and local response?
So the FBI would respond in support of our state and local partners. State and local partners are better positioned to respond immediately.
Okay.
So we maintain tactical human resources we would be immediately coordinating with them, and we would have agents that are in the vicinity very quickly. They're just likely going to be on the scene first.
Okay, thank you.
In
If
addition,
I might, Becky, I think that goes back to what I had mentioned before about the different levels of government or jurisdictions having various resources and expertise. These gentlemen have training and expertise and can get resources that I can't, or the sheriff can't necessarily. So we all play that role where, I can get people, I know who to call right away that they may not know, but they can get to a much higher level than I can and get some significant resources in the event of an issue that may occur. So we all play different roles and have that different expertise.
and the other piece that I want to add to that, when we talk about community partnerships, not only is it with state police and the sheriffs and FBI town, Saratoga County also has a emergency response team, and I actually sit on that team as a member of the school district. So in the event, and we've actually practiced with that team, an active shooter a few years back, respond, depending on the situation and the scenario, that team would also be responding. All right, Mr. Keller, what role, if any, does the FBI play after a potential threat or incident?
Sure. Obviously, I would echo exactly what Jeff said, but in addition to responding and the resources, we provide a lot of tools that maybe they don't have on scene, whether it be through our evidence response team, supplement the SWAT team related to the Saratoga, like you mentioned there. We have people. We have people and money and resources, right? So when there's a crisis event, that's what we would consider obviously an active shooter or anything like that. I like to joke that we almost become a transformer. For that first 24 hours, we're using a lot of the local resources. We're trying to figure out what's happening and all this stuff while everybody comes to assemble. And within that first, like I said, around 24 to 48 hours, it almost takes over the entire town because we have every resource that you can think of that kind of comes in and is able to help. In addition to that, we collect intelligence to determine if there's any other threats. So when it comes to an investigative piece post-threat, that's probably our most significant tool that we're going to be able to use through our cyber resources. So we're going to try and get the electronics of the shooter, whether it be in the town or the school or wherever it may be, and we're going to exploit them immediately. We're going to serve a search warrant on the residents. Again, usually with the locals' assistance, but because of the interstate threats and some of the other violations and enhancements you get with federal charges, usually we end up supplementing and assisting them when it comes to the searches. So that's where it really becomes a thing, the resources, the investigative tools, and making sure that this isn't the only, making sure it's the only actor versus a widespread network across the country.
Thank you. And to expand upon that, Mr. Hunter, if you could talk about the role with FBI, talking about the same threat, what role in terms of communication and coordination with school officials?
Yeah, so I think Charlie did a pretty good job summing it up. If we were talking about in response after a specific incident were to occur, I think what I would add there would be some very unique resources that we have that Charlie didn't necessarily touch on with victim witness specialists, right? We have people that can come out and speak to people that were affected by whatever happened. And we also have public affairs specialists actually in the back of the room right now with us today who could be here that could help with messaging and what are we going to say to the families and what are we going to say to the media. So we have those people here in Albany that can provide that type of assistance. I think as we start talking about potentially communication and coordination with school officials outside of what Charlie talked about and those additional resources, if we were talking about an incident that was a serious threat but wasn't credible, then we'd be talking about engaging school administration in a timely fashion, probably through your information technology folks, and we would likely be bringing our cyber team as well as potentially representatives from our task forces to try to exploit the information that you have received related to the threat. And that could be something like email headers. So when we see threats that come into the area from Proton email, we need to be collecting that email header information so that we can exploit it. We need to be looking at who the service provider was that was utilized. If it's a US-based service provider, well, we have certain legal authorities that we get through the Department of Justice that we can use to determine the potentially the user. If it's overseas-based, we're going to leverage our overseas resources. So we'll be talking with school administration officials to collect that information that could be vital in helping us determine where the threat emanated from.
So we've been talking a little bit about recovery, and right prior to that I was asking you guys some questions about, you know, responding to potential threats. And I want to step back just for a minute because you mentioned about, you know, an incident team, excuse me. We all, and we talked about this at our first safety series that we had back a few months ago about the incident command system. And we have an incident command system, the first responders have an incident command system, you guys have an incident command system, we all have an incident command system, so that when we all come together, it works, it gels, it flows. So for example, our incident commander, Dr. Robinson, he would be working with the incident commander from the respective agencies. Our public information officer would be working with the public information, you know, folks from sheriff, state police, you know, so on and so forth. So again, we have been trained in the incident command system. We have emergency response teams in every school. We do tons of training. We practice mass evacuation drills. We practice tabletop drills so that we are familiar with what our role is in that situation if a situation did arise. So you had mentioned that team, and I wanted to bring it back a little bit and just remind people that it's a similar structure in each one of those. And the town, I'm sure, has an incident command system in place. Mr. Castagnoli, how does the high school follow up after or up with a potential threat or incident?
So we rolled out a new software recently, how recently, it was this year at some point, on any threats that we get or any threat assessments, so we can kind of start to track that, see if there's any commonalities. Again, it does vary if it's a credible threat or not, and the follow-up, there's usually a follow-up with the person. If it did emanate from a student, right, there's follow-up procedures that will be in place with that student, with that family, oftentimes with counselors, outside counselors. For our team, like as a high school team, we'll take anything and then we'll debrief. Like the debrief has become really important to us. We'll go through what happened, what occurred, where we can improve. And then we'll use it as a tabletop and just twist it up a little bit and say, well, no, now let's pretend this happened and what were the steps that we have taken. So for us, we've taken any kind of threat and turned it into a training exercise, and our debrief is real important to hopefully improve as we go.
Ron, can you talk about the recent one that we spent a lot of time the other night in the state, the SRO spent a lot of time knocking on doors? The Instagram threat?
That's when I text you like 3
Yes,
a.m. or
yeah.
whatever. So that happens a lot with us too. And the great thing is if I text Dr. Robinson too, he always texts back. So, yeah, I don't know. But so, yeah, that started, I think, with Deputy Carpenter, myself. I got something from a student. So it was a student who actually said something, emailed me, hey, Mr. Agostinoni, I want you to take a look at this. I looked at it, well, that's concerning. Get a hold of Deputy Carpenter, get a hold of Dr. Robinson, Lieutenant Rudolph, who was just standing back there, and then we get people involved, and then the deputies start going to homes, and they're checking on things to try to figure out what was said, why was this said, what's the meaning of it, and we're able to kind of go through that process. Is that the one you're talking about? So that happens often because kids say things, sometimes it don't make, I'm not the type of person that says kids these days, because if I had social media when I was young, right, I would say a lot of things that didn't make sense too. So it's not just kids, it's the access they have. So oftentimes they're saying things, but we treat everything like it's a potential threat, and then we'll follow up, and oftentimes it's not credible, and that's what we want. So we spend a lot of time chasing those down, and it's typically at all hours, but that was the most recent, maybe a week or two ago.
And we take every situation we're informed of very serious. We treat, anytime a student comes and tells us something, anytime a parent comes and tells us something, anytime a first responder or we hear something or see something,
And I have to tell you,
we
students,
follow up.
and students are great with emailing us because students don't want to tell anyone, right? It's just their code, so to speak, right? But they will email us all the time. We find out a ton of information because students will send us emails all the time, to myself, to our associate and assistant principals. I know it happens in middle school, so we appreciate when students let us know. So if you're talking to them, tell us.
I just asked, how do you follow up on that? And a student that does do the right thing, are we making a big deal about that as well? Just so that is on the forefront, that was a credible act that they did, and then what are we doing there to follow up with those students and those families that are doing the right thing?
Yes, and depends. Sometimes don't tell anyone I sent this to you, but, so we might not do it. But we're calling the families like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, you know, Ron said this, we really appreciate it. Becky said this, like, we'll see the kid in the hall, like, so we'll do that. And oftentimes, that student will give us more information. So it does happen quite a bit. And we really appreciate it when they do that. And luckily, we follow up and usually we move on. But it is beneficial.
That we just have to make that the commonplace, like it just almost break down that guard, like giving up the information if they have it, not making it common practice, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting because I was in a classroom today at the elementary school, and a fourth grader, there was a lot of noise in the hall, and the student was not happy. And was screaming in the hall, and there was an issue, and a couple kids started laughing, and that kid turned around and said, it's not funny. We don't laugh at people. And I'm like, no, it is funny. No, that student can't control that. We shouldn't laugh at people. And I actually went over and said something to the student in front of the student and just said, thank you for saying that, because that is so true what you just said. And we kind of had a conversation about what was happening and why. And, you know, that potentially could rise and escalate to a bullying situation, but you want to catch it and you want to, you know, stomp on it right away if you can. But you're right, we do want to make it more commonplace. And the see something, say something is huge. And currently right now, and I'm going to go over it at the end and just review our website and review some of the information about where you can report and how you can report. But right now, we do have QR codes, and we do have some posters around, and we have advertised that. We also have a safety email, and we do follow up on that, and we do respond to people's email. And we are in the process of implementing what's called the TAP app, which is part of our threat assessment package that we haven't, quote, tapped into yet, where students and parents and staff, anybody, can just use the app and report if they see something, they can say something. It's just an easier way for people to report, and also it's at their fingertips so that they can do it.
And Go Guardian.
And yes, and Go Guardian, our system with emails and/or work that students are doing. If something is of concern, it's flagged back to, you know, your point that you talked a little bit about, and we follow up on that. So we take every single situation very, very serious, and also use it as a teachable moment. And to your point, Mr. Hunter, about serious versus, you know, credible, and some of them aren't credible, and we use that as a teachable moment because kids do make mistakes. With that being said, I'm going to, Derek, turn it over to you for a second. When we talk about social media, as we were talking, what can parents do when talking about social media to their children? And talk a little bit about FOMO, fear of missing out.
I think if you're going to hand a device over to your child, regardless of the age, regardless if it's a tablet or a phone, or if you're letting them get Instagram or TikTok for the first time, whatever it is, talking about how to use it responsibly, I think coming up with expectations as a family, when it's okay to use, who's okay to talk to, and including them, including your child in that, especially our older kids, just to give them some sense of independence and freedom that they have some say in the matter, because it is ultimately impacting their life and their social life. So, in making sure the expectations and the consequences are understood, that this is what the phone or app or game or device is used for, and if making sure the child is aware that there are going to be consequences if those are not followed. And I think following through on those consequences, for sure. I will advise against, you know, I think it's easy to use taking technology away as a punishment. I wouldn't always resort to that as the very first thing. If there is an issue with social media, you're likely going to get some backlash. It could impact your relationship with your child. I think focus on, okay, if I take away the technology, is that really getting to the root of the problem? Because once you give it back, chances are it's going to happen again. If you have to take the technology away for safety reasons or it continues to be a problem, sure. But don't always just jump to that right away. Try to figure out, okay, what's really causing this to begin with. I think also when you're talking about technology, you can talk about the positives, but also talk about the risks. Do that at every age. Obviously, the way you're going to talk to a pre-K student about using their tablet safely is a little different than how you're going to talk to your teenager about using Instagram safely. But you can still talk about it at every age. And I think one of the biggest things is encouraging kids to listen to their feelings and trusting their instincts. If they feel uncomfortable or unsafe at any time with anyone, anything they see, whether it's a message, a video, not to ignore those feelings. That's a gift that we have to be able to sense when we feel uncomfortable. Report it on the app, on the game. Say no to any unsafe requests or to forward unsafe things or take unsafe pictures. And then tell a safe adult. And not just you, because a lot of times kids might feel like, oh, I did something wrong. I went on YouTube and my family said I wasn't supposed to be on YouTube. Or I downloaded Instagram on my friend's phone and it's not being monitored on my family's plan because I did it separately. Now I'm in an unsafe situation. I don't want to tell my parents I'm going to get in trouble because I broke the rule. I think when it comes to that, we have to encourage kids, their safety is the most important thing. Even if they think they've done something wrong, the phone can be replaced, the app can be replaced, the tablet can be replaced. Their safety cannot be replaced. So when it comes to that as well, kids might not feel comfortable telling you everything. I know when I grew up, if I did something wrong, I wasn't running to my parents right away. If my brother and sister did, then yes, I would run right away. But have a conversation, hey, besides me, who else can you talk to if you felt unsafe? Aunts, uncles, school teachers, let your kids figure out at least 5 others so that they at least have an outlet, in case they don't feel comfortable. And don't take it personally if they don't come to you. They might feel more comfortable talking to their teacher first and coming up with a plan on how to tell you. So encouraging different adults in their lives that can help them, coming up with a family media agreement, validating their feelings and not dismissing concerns is huge. What children and youth think is a big deal might not translate to us as thinking it's a big deal. So if someone says something like, oh, I really feel like I'm missing out because, all my friends are having such more exciting lives than me. Instead of saying, oh, I'm sure that's not true, say, well, why do you think that way? Put it back on your kids and really kind of delve into that conversation, and you can really figure out, okay, maybe your life really is good and you didn't really see it in that perspective. Or when it comes to FOMO, I think that's a huge thing. I read recently something about JOMO. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. Instead of fear of missing out, change it to the joy of missing out. There are some things you don't want to be involved in, right? Or if some kids complaining, I really wanted to go to that concert with my friends. Well, have them rethink. Instead of thinking that negative thought, do you really like that artist to begin with? Are you going to spend your own money on something that you maybe weren't going to have fun with, and instead go do something you like? Maybe you didn't go to that concert, but you had a really great night with your cousin or your other friend. Go out and do ice cream, right? So trying to rephrase the negative from the positive when it comes to FOMO. Journaling, I think, is big too. Keeping a thought journal for kids when it comes to FOMO. If they don't want to, get rid of their technology or whatever the reason is, having them jot down their thoughts can be really helpful. And remind kids that the things they see on social media, especially other people's lives and pictures and videos, they're filtered. It's only what people want us to see. There's a lot more layers behind what they're seeing on social media, and it's not always picture perfect. Everyone's got issues. Everyone's got problems. Everyone tries to hide and show not their true selves. So, and then try to reduce screen time as much as possible. Get involved, right? Help them do some fun stuff that doesn't always relate to the screen. And those are some things that I think can help combat that. So.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I just had a question when you, oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah, when you were talking about age-appropriate conversations, I feel like a lot of what we've talked about so far has been for older kids. So I was wondering, as it relates to younger kids, like early elementary school kids, if you have any tips or suggestions for how to broach this kind of stuff with them, because I know for myself, I'm really struggling with what feels like a not appropriate thing to be talking with a 6-year-old about, being essentially forced on us to have become something that we have to talk to our kids about. And so I guess I would ask the agents as well if they have any suggestions for what level of detail you should go into with kids that age, or how frank should you be? What should we be doing or saying to them, or not doing or not saying to them without scaring them?
Right. That's a great question. Yeah.
Elementary school kids, and that's a lot of what you've been talking about seems to relate to high schools who are aware and will report, and kind of a little lost about the elementary school.
I do want to point out one thing. We, at the elementary level, we're still having the same conversation of who is that safe person? Who are those 3 to 5 people you can go talk to? And maybe we're reducing it, but who's that one person? Also at the elementary level, we are teaching about digital citizenship, which is a component of, when you're using your Chromebook, when you're using an iPad, and believe it or not, yes, some kids do have a phone at the elementary level. But we are talking about some of those pieces about what is it to be, using it and using it in an appropriate way. We're having that conversation young.
And I try to, not to use a sports analogy, but you got to learn foundational skills, and just having a first grader all the way to a 10th grader. So I span that, first and fourth graders are, I know. But the first and fourth graders are on Roblox, right? So having the conversation when they're using that, what is safe, you don't chat, you don't use it. So I'm not the expert, but the conversation I have with them is a little different than the student who's on Snapchat. So I think the conversations are similar, but tailored different. Just like your youth basketball practice in first grade is going to look much different than our varsity practice, but similar skills. I mean, that's how I think is one way to address it. The expert, there might be a different, but.
Right.
I guess if I could just give an example, one thing, I saw in some of the incidents that happened that, kids were using their teachers' phones in emergency mode to call 911. And I thought to myself, God, would my son know how to do that? I don't think he would. So I talked to him about it and showed him how to do it. And then he said that I was scaring him and that he was feeling like he was unsafe, and like I was like, oh gosh, did I go too far with that? Or so I don't know if you have any suggestions.
I'd say, no, I would absolutely, and I'm just, I don't have any expertise other than I've been a father for a long time. And I would speak very frankly with them. It's the foundation that you establish when they're young that carries on for years. And right now, you still have a lot of sway with them. Now, that can change as they get older, obviously, but the credibility that you build when they're young, if you build credibility, if you build a solid relationship, if you're frank with them, if you're honest with them, you know, maybe when they're 6, they don't quite understand everything you're telling them, but they're going to understand a lot more when they're 8, and they're going to say, gee, my mom and dad was right. And that's how you build credibility as they get older. You tell them the truth, even if it's a little scary at times. Tell them the truth, and you'll build that credibility with them, because they'll always be able to go back and say, I'm glad I listened to my parents. I'm glad they told me the truth. They're not always going to tell you that. They're not always going to verbalize that to you, but it's there. I've seen it myself, and that's the best advice I could give you. As far as social media is concerned, one of the most scariest parts about it is with the algorithms, if the kids are looking at things that are extremely negative, that are dangerous, guess what they get more of? Negativity and danger and dangerous things and topics. And it's just as I'm sure you all know, once they look at a couple of things of a certain topic, it just keeps coming around. And there's been studies and a lot of discussion around that, where the constant barrage that they get can be debilitating for it. So, when it goes back to monitoring social media best you can, I think that's a very strong reason why you would want to, because to hopefully talk through that with them and see what they're looking at. Because if they're looking at it one day, it's going to come back on their phone the next day and the next day and so on and so forth. It's very scary the way those algorithms work.
Can I just ask something really quick related to this? That doesn't have to do with social media particularly though, but how would you propose that we present just school safety to an elementary school?
So that's actually where I was just going to go a little bit. So our school resource officers do an incredible job at every level, and the elementary school resource officer, they're in the room right now, they're all here. They do walk around classroom to classroom to classroom. They make sure that people know, students know who they are, teachers know who they are. We talk about different scenarios about school safety. We have a teacher in the room here who's at the elementary level who talks very candidly about, school safety in her classroom, as do others, because we expect that, we practice it, we have drills, we talk about why it's important. We want students to feel comfortable to be able to respond in an emergency. And I gotta tell you, they are amazing. When we do mass evacuation drills, when we do practice drills, when we do lockdowns, they know what to do. They know because their classroom teacher has taught them the skills to be able to respond. And they process some of that. And the school resource officers, also, like I said, when they're walking around, they stop in classrooms, they may read a book about safety, they may talk about classroom safety in that particular room. Teachers ask questions about, hey, my room's a little tricky, can you help me a little bit?
So it's not all on our shoulders.
No, let me go back to, you raise a good point. It's not all on your shoulders, just like it's not all on our shoulders. It's not the school's 100% responsibility for school safety. It's all of our responsibility when we talk about school safety. We're partners in this together, and we're always looking at how can we do things better. Just as parents, we're always looking at how we can do things better. Some of us have more experience, we have older kids, some of us have younger kids. We learn from our experiences, and we are here to help you if you're looking for resources. Our school building administrators our school counselors. We have some student support counselors here in the room. They're here to help, they're here to answer. Teachers are an incredible resource in the classroom. They can absolutely help, and again, our school resource officers are more than willing to talk more about, school safety in a particular classroom or building as needed. Dr. Robinson.
Mrs. Cohen, just not to hijack your panel.
We hijacked them already, we're good.
It's fine. Just a couple comments that I think is important. So I want to start with a comment that probably most parents in here have told their kids, don't talk to strangers. And you probably told your kids that when they were tiny little, or when you cross the street, look left, look right again. Those basic things that we have done because those were the quote-unquote threats. But the reality of it is, the new boogeyman isn't the stranger. The boogeyman is that device that you have given your 5-year-old kid to keep him or her quiet. And now, quite frankly, you have a little kid. Most little kids even have electronic devices in their cradles. I'm going to show my age, right? And that's the crazy part about it is that kids access things or things are presented to kids that they're not even accessing. Back to Mr. Barrett's point. So it is important for parents to always parent their kids. And parents are always going to be the first parent. The second point I want to make is that as a school, we are a resource to partner with parents. And what I mean by that, if you as a parent know that you have certain hesitations because of your personality or because of your lack of knowledge, but yet you have the desire to better protect your child, that's when you reach out to say, listen, I feel uncomfortable having this conversation with my kid, but I know someone needs to have this conversation with my kid. That's when you reach out. That's when we become partners in those conversations. Because back to the point here about a trusted adult, probably one of my kids, particularly I'm thinking of right now, I wasn't his trusted adult. I would be the last person he wants to tell something to because he was afraid of my reaction. Like, really? Okay, you should tell your mother that first. And so I say that because your parents also know the dynamics with their trusted adults and within their homes, right? And so I think that's a big part of this conversation too. That if you know that there's something going on that you feel as if you don't have the skills, the desired disposition, otherwise, just don't drop it. That's when you reach out to other partners. And that's when we can say, okay, maybe it's not one of us, maybe it's someone from Saratoga Center for the Family that we have a partnership with. Maybe it's another counseling center that you have another. So those are the big things I think that when we're thinking about building those partnerships become important. So the whole concept of the boogeyman, as we used to call, that's a whole different ballgame because kids are accessing information virtually like this. So we need to be aware of that piece of it. And the last piece I want to mention that Becky mentioned too, that as schools, we're going to act as reasonable parents would. We're not going to act as perfect parents. Just like I don't think there's a perfect parent in this room. And if you think you are, think twice again, right? So I said that we always want to do what's in the best interest of our kids. So I said it because sometimes when we have conversation with your child and your child comes home and say, oh my God, Mom and Dad, Mrs. So-and-so had a conversation with me about this, and it may not be something that you're comfortable having a conversation with. Don't go off the handle and thinking that we were doing something not in your kid's best interest. That's when you build a partnership the other way around too, to say, okay, can you tell me why this came up, why we had this conversation? Because hopefully you reinforce it at home. So it goes both ways. It's the point I'm making, right? The things that you're seeing at home, because oftentimes we hear behaviors back to after the fact, and we're like, wow, I wish that person would have told us about that because we could have intervened. In the same way, when we see certain things, we want to reach out to the parents. Guess what? You may say your child is perfect at home, but here's what we've seen at school. And there's something going on that we need to know. And the last piece of that too, oftentimes or sometimes there are things going on with your child that we're not even having a conversation with you, that we may be having a conversation with some of these folks to say, guess what? There's certain behaviors that a child of this age should not be manifesting. So there could be something happening. And that's when Becky didn't talk about, we have the CPS connection. And sometimes parents get pissed with us when we say, how do you call something? At the end of the day, we have your best interest of your kid in mind. And sometimes, it turn out that it may not be the case, but I say this way, I'd rather err on the side of caution any day than throwing caution to the wind and something happening after the fact, we all come and say the proverbial, oh, I'm so sorry. It's too late, right? So I really want to emphasize that point. That's the reason why we really started doing these safety series to show that from a mental health perspective, from a school safety perspective, from an awareness perspective, and the big part of awareness is awareness of their own self. You know, so my wife and I, we're so different. And so there's certain things I tell her, like, okay, you have to talk to your son, you have to talk to your daughter. Because I know I'm not built that way to have that conversation, and vice versa, right? So that's the self-awareness piece also that as parents or caregivers that we have to have in terms of what's our own strengths and weaknesses, and when do we ask for help to help support our kids. So I think your questions really speak to that piece of, and if we do that more, we can get to the bottom of some of these unfortunate things that you see happening within our schools when someone knew something was awry with this young person. And the parents probably weren't equipped. I'm saying, if you're not equipped, it's not an embarrassment. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's the converse. When you don't ask for help, that's a sign of weakness. And we have a lot of folks, either internally in school or partnerships that we have. And that's, again, this is a perfect example of the types of partners that we have to have those conversations with folks and say, listen, you know, my kids like killing animals. I'm not sure that's a good thing or not. Okay, wild animals, but all your neighbors' pets, that's a problem. You know, I said it because literally we've had that, and the parents are like, well, what's the problem? That's a problem. That's not a normal behavior. That's a problem. Let's have a conversation why. We're not accusing your kid of being the next thing or whatever, but we need to know why, and so then that's where we tap into experts. So I really want to share it because I think sometimes we make this thing way too much, too complicated, when actually it comes down to those very simple relationship building pieces. Us as adults with each other, and us building relationships and trusting relationships with our kids. And so that's truly, that's the genesis of all these, and we have a lot of great partners to help support our efforts here. However, if you're not tapping into it, that's when things kind of fall through the cracks and we miss certain things. And so hopefully, you know, I appreciate your questions because it does start when they're tiny. And back to Mr. Barrett's piece of it, the behaviors they learn now, in terms of expectation to report something, say something, those things follow through as they grow older, as we all know because we're doing it now. Because at some point it happened to us in our past years. So again, thanks for allowing me to hijack Mrs. Farmer.
Absolutely, and we were able to go through like 5, 6, 7, 8 slides because with those people we could do that. But you know, Dr. Robinson mentioned a key point, and that is our partnerships. And again, we're not in this alone. It's not just our responsibility; it's everyone's. And we couldn't do it without our partnerships, our panel members, our other friends and community members out there. And we are so fortunate as a system, with Dr. Robinson's support as well as our Board of Education, to many of us are involved in so many different committees and community committees and community involvement that when I'm at a particular board meeting or I'm at a particular county meeting, there's so many of us from the county, from first responders to other providers, mental health providers, so on and so forth, at the same table. So we're all talking, we're all networking, we're all connecting. We're always talking about how can we help our students, what resources are out there for the community. We developed this website. It's on the district's website under parents. If you go to the district website and you go under parents and you go to family resources, you'll see this website. There's a wealth of information here to help in many different areas and resources. And we're always constantly looking at how can we update the information and keep things current. So, and the last piece I want to mention, and I say this with all sincerity, please feel free to call the superintendent's office. You can ask for Dr. Robinson. I'm just kidding. Myself. Ask for me, Becky Carmen, and I'm in the superintendent's office, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation about school safety, about mental health, about whatever that topic is to help you feel more comfortable. If you need resources, I can help you connect to those various resources. And again, we have a wealth of knowledge in here within our own district. I am not an expert in everything, and I have to look outside and ask people too for information. But I say that, in all sincerity, please feel free to call. To wrap up, we have about 8 minutes, and I also just want to allow 1 second. Hold your thought, you're first. any questions, but very, very quickly, I'm going to ask each of you to leave us with, one or two key things that you want to leave our audience with tonight. So Derek, if you want to go ahead first.
First, I'd just like to say, I think I can't remember the exact statistic, but I remember that a lot of adults and parents have concerns about their children and their social media use and their safety online, but most spend an average of like 45 minutes, less than 45 minutes, talking to their children about safety across their entire childhood. So I think when you do have these conversations, have open conversations and often, it's not just a one and done deal. Get creative. When you're in the car driving somewhere, just have a quick safety conversation. When you're cooking dinner or something, or after dinner when you sit down at the table, having regular safety nights, I guess, and conversations is super helpful. And reaching out if you are looking for more information beyond what was discussed tonight, you need additional details or resources. I overwhelm myself with the number of resources we have on a variety of topics, especially on social media and internet safety risks for a variety of ages. Reach out, and would be happy to support parents as well in this. We're all in this together. I can't do this work by myself. The schools can't do this by themselves, so we're all in this together for the kids. So,
Thank you. Supervisor Barrett?
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that there are a lot of resources out there for you, and if you're not sure where to go, where to start, you can, or if you want to report something, we have a report an issue option on our webpage, cliftonpark.org. My email is there if you want to email me directly with a question. Of course, everything's confidential. But as Chairman of Health and Human Services for Saratoga County, myself and our team, we've been working to expand the resources available to families. And there was a great article in the Daily Gazette Sunday about some of that. If you get a chance to read that article, I won't go through everything, but we've been adding resources for mental health as well as addiction services for large swaths of our society here in Saratoga County. I'm now working on bringing more resources directly to the schools and hiring professionals through the county that would just work within our schools in the county on these very important issues. We just established a family navigator position in 2022 where families that's a person you can contact to start the process if you have a loved one and a child that's having issues. So there's a lot of resources out there through Saratoga County and the town. So please, if you need those services, please reach out. There's a lot of people working 24/7 around the county that are here to help you and your family. So please reach out.
Thank you. Mr. Kevin?
So I want to thank Shen for inviting us. As Dr. Robinson said, we have a great partnership here. And what I want everyone to know is we're in the community. The FBI, people think of the FBI, they think of the shows, the movies, they see this. A ton of people have never met anyone in the FBI. We live in all of these communities. My wife's a teacher here at Shen. My kids go to school here, they're in athletics here. Hopefully my son will be lifeguarding. If anyone knows anyone in the town here, let me know.
We need lifeguards. We need lifeguards.
But no, we're here, and that's the message. Like, the threat is real, right? And that's why we're all here, and I'm glad you all came to be part of the solution, because the community is it, right? The shooter in Buffalo at the Tops lived a couple hours away. He was in the FBI Albany territory where his residence was. This happens everywhere. But as I mentioned earlier, the sooner we identify it, the more likely we are to succeed in making the threat go away. And one last plug, our community outreach specialist, Tim Leonard in the back there, he has some pamphlets on different things with school safety, child safety, etc. So please stop by and see him at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hard to follow the three and the great discussion that occurred today. And look, we're lucky. I live in the community. My wife is also an elementary school teacher. My dad was an administrator in the Capital District. I graduated from a high school in the Capital District. So we're all vested in the community. And we're very fortunate to have the group of leaders that we have here today. We're a resource. look, at the end of the day, somebody used the term, we have a gift, an innate gift to recognize when something's wrong. And there's a great book called The Gift of Fear, and I highly recommend it for everybody in the audience here, because it talks about how as humans, we tend to try to rationalize things and explain things away, even though our spider senses are telling us that something might be wrong. So, you know, I applaud you all for being here. I would leave you with a thought. I actually see myself sitting out there as a community member, and I see my role in kind of preparation and prevention actually more as a community member than as an FBI agent, because I feel like I can play a bigger role as a parent and a coach in the community. And then we're here to support you professionally, you know, in the event there is an incident. And never hesitate to reach out. Nothing is too small. So thank you very much for hosting the event.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over. You have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, this question is more regarding response. Would that be appropriate?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So I saw your SAVE project. I saw like the year dated on it around the year 2000. The FBI, and you mentioned Secret Service, and I think also DHS has put out some guidance on that. In that our best course of action in any event would be tiered, and it would start with escape, and then move to evade, and then move to, you know, grab a stapler and try to bludgeon the dude or lady, equal opportunity. Where have we seem to have defaulted to, there is a real threat, we're going to do the shelter in place, we're going to do the lockdown, and it seems to have defaulted just to the escape, or rather just to the evade and into the hide portion of it. And I'm wondering if, following the guidance of our public safety and intelligence professionals, if there's a way to do a SAVE 2.0 and to try to use technology in a way, hey, there's a threat in the East Wing. If you can make it from the East Wing to the West Wing in under a minute, then everyone farther past the West Wing should hit the South Stairwell and run into the woods. Or at a large campus like this, have it communicated where the school next door can open the side door and they can all run into it, and bring in a portion of that escape function, which seems to be the recommended course of action.
So I'm going to answer very generically, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Robinson, because we are there. And we are doing several things within the system to that point.
Yeah, so you know, the challenge with your question is right spot on. The challenge we have is that we're not going to tell you, right? Because the minute we do that, we just basically wrote it out, safety protocols. For instance, we have the capacity, certainly in this building is actually 3 buildings. When I say building, this building, the middle school, high school buildings, and we're working on capacity now, but easier elementary, to even compartmentalize locking down within buildings. And so we're not going to say how that happens, clearly. So I said it because you're right, technology has allowed us to do more than we were able to do in the past, and do it, quite frankly, with the press of a button to do certain things. And so absolutely, as we're going through a process right now, a pretty extensive investment that we have made through upgrading the phone system, technology system. Becky mentioned if there's an emergency, you're here. So Mr. Agustinoni is like the voice from everyone, because he has recorded our lockdown voice, and so I get on my phone, if something happened, I get texts all over the place, and I hear his voice, lockdown, this and this. And I'm like, why is Ron calling? And I realized, no, that's the voice that we have, so we have a common voice across the system. So with technology, you're right, we're better able to do those type things. And you're right, the 2.0 is how we then start practicing those drills from that standpoint of how do we get kids to a safe place. And here's what we're, the gentleman talked about the swatting piece and the attention that sometimes kids do to certain things, to say, hey, let me ride in the bathroom, bomb at 6 whatever on this date, and all of a sudden they're hoping that they're going to lock a school down, and they think it's cute, right? But it's not cute. It's a huge disruption, and we investigate those things, and quite frankly, it depends on the situation, potential to prosecute. But now, how do we try to sweep and do those kind of things and create safe areas? It's again with technology. So your point is spot on, because we always have to be one step ahead of the game. Because you certainly know from different school shooting incidents, I think it was one in Alabama a couple of years back was a perfect example of this. Someone put an alarm, kids started running outside, and there became a prime situation. So I say that because there's no one action or reaction to a particular situation. And sometimes we get parents say, why didn't you guys lock down? Why didn't you do this? Well, you know what? We didn't because we had some legitimate reasons for doing or not doing. And I think that's when sometimes we get the pushback by people saying that, why did you do this time and not that time? Every situation we have to try to unpack and try to figure out, okay, the credibility of it and also the disruption aspect of it in terms of how do we, sometimes trying to solve a problem, we probably create a worse problem. If we have, 3,200 kids run at the high school, to try to do a certain thing with 3,200 kids at high school at certain times, we have to have a very measured approach that we're not creating a worse problem by trying to do those kind of things, right? And so those are situations where we're a little bit more controlled environments. In a crisis situation, we also plan those too. And so the crisis is kind of where we basically, at this point, anything goes, but depends on the situation we're in. We hope to God that we're never in that crisis mode. But on the same note, back to the parents here, we want kids to be aware that if you're in that crisis mode, regardless of how you're feeling, you got to take certain actions, right? And our staff to be aware, regardless of how you're feeling, you have to take certain actions. And so while we don't perseverate on that, we want it to be in people's mind that these are worst case scenario situations. The typical situation, this is how we would handle it. Worst case scenario, we need to have those situations as well. And that's why even practicing with our first responders become important. And we say it all the time, we have SROs. If certain things happen, kids need to know that there's certain movements, and several years back we did a active shooter drill, and I was one of the participants, and to have the sheriff guy storm in, and there was like everybody face down, and I'm thinking like, I'm wearing my nice suit, I'm not laying on the ground, and the guy was like face down, and I'm on the ground laying down, and I'm like, but I'm the superintendent. And at that point, it didn't matter because the point he's making that at this point, we don't know who is a potential what, right? And so for me, I was like, wow, there's no exception to the rule under certain situations. And so those are good points, and those are also even conversations that we even want parents to have, that guess what? Under certain situations, your kid needs to know that guess what? It's okay to be fearful, right? And go with your fear and your instincts. It's okay to feel uncomfortable, but what's the worst case scenario we're trying to avoid? And so the second part of that Becky kind of mentioned too is the recovery part of it. How do we have people after the fact engaging? We have, two of our wonderful folks here. How do we have people engaging with students after a particular situation, having a conversation that, yes, it was okay for you to be scared at that moment. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what you felt and how those kind of things is so we can manage those emotions. And so each time, quite frankly, you be better under crisis situations. So those are the things that we can't answer all the questions in these, but these are the part of the reason why we have these safety series. That's part of the reason why we have a lot of information on the website. And that's also the part of the reason that again, Becky jokingly said, call my office. It's easy for people to contact my office, and we'll relay it to the right person to talk to make sure you get the right resources. And it's important for us to stay in communication with each other. Now, particularly if you hear of something that you're like, or it may not look right, feel right, sound right, that's what a situational awareness is about. Because we want to know. And trust me, back to the example Mr. Agustino mentioned, literally we had, God bless our SRO guys, they were out knocking on people's doors at 11, 12 o'clock at night, and families like, whoa, yeah, because your kid posted something. So guess what? If it's my kid and some sheriff knocking my door at night because you posted something, I think you're going to think twice about posting again. I'm not saying how you deal with your kids, but think about that, right? That we want to show all those kids, and trust me, they all posted, oh my God, the sheriff came, because they need to know that we're going to follow up. And I think it's important for you as a parent to know, because at the end of the day, folks, there's many things we can control, but there's also a lot of dynamics that's outside of our control. And the more we are in it together, the more those things we can control to provide that safe learning environment for our students. And so hopefully that you walk away with that, and walk away to have that conversation. If you don't have kids in school, your neighbor's kids or someone, having those conversations next time you're sitting around, say, hey, when the last time we talked about our kids about safety? When spring is coming, kids riding their bikes, every parent's buying a new helmet. Let's talk about safety. Great opportunity points to have those conversations. Mrs. Carmen, you have two other questions.
Yeah, and then back. Just in terms of the significant investment we're making in 2.0 and updating everything, are we working on making the buildings smarter? Sandy Hook and in Nashville, they shot out glass doors and got
Yes,
in. Are
yes.
we doing something to make it harder to get in?
So the answer is yes, and yes, and yes.
Okay. That was
Yes.
a big one. And then semi-automatic weapons, it seems like there should be something that could see those coming. Is there any sort of technology that can aid us?
So it's interesting. We're going to be talking to our FBI partners about some of this too. Because there's a lot of stuff that people are selling that's supposed to do certain things that not proven as such, right? And so especially now with some of the artificial intelligence stuff coming out. So in fact, we just had a person reached out to us about some equipment that's supposed to. So one of the things that we try to do, we try to have conversation with our law enforcement partners in terms of what's real, what's preventable versus something that you buy to give you a false sense of security. And it really doesn't work, right? And so we try to have those kind of conversations. We're doing some site visits when next week, Ron? Monday. We're doing some site visits to some other schools that have invested in some other technology that we want to actually see how it works within that school. And schools of comparable size, in this case, high school comparable size. So we want to see some of those kind of things because the last thing we want to do is invest in something that gives a false sense, again, of security because we didn't do the proper vetting. So and that's a constant piece for us as well. So as those things come to our attention, we vet it to see if it's something worthwhile investing in, and we talk to the experts to say, what's your viewpoints? What are you seeing across the state or across the country in terms of some of these new technologies? And on the same note, I'm going to put out there too, I don't know who you are in this audience, and I don't know what you do. You might be the person sitting on the perfect answer for us. And if you are, reach out, share information. Hey, I'm aware of this or that, and let us know. And we try to vet those things. So we're not going to assume that we know everything because we're getting information from our partners and you too as parents and community members because you all have different professions, different connections. You may have resources and information that we might be aware of. So don't hesitate to also share some of those things, specific things with us as well. And I'm going to end with this last piece. Becky, we're in the process now of looking at a pretty comprehensive audit process that's been a national model that's being used. And that came from a parent who brought it to our attention some years back. And we wanted to vet it because the process was relatively new. And we want to make sure that it's something that's going to give us information that we think that's better than the information we're getting now. So it also came from a parent making a suggestion. In one of these forums several years ago, they said, okay, let's vet this, make sure this is something that has a system that's going to, again, enhance our capacity as we move forward. So absolutely, we embrace the ideas, the thoughts, and the suggestions coming into us.
Yep. Okay. Quick question. When Hayes Road, they have that, like they say, cameras in use. The Hayes Park, Lockmill Road. And I was just wondering, the park, the new park they built from the school, because I was walking a few months ago, and it was around school time. When the kids get out of school and they walk, the new park. Do they have cameras in that park like they do on Hayes?
We have the great person, Supervisor Barrett could answer that question.
No.
Because I saw there was a fight. I worked with some high school, but not a fight. I didn't know if they were fooling around and two groups, and then I said, I'm just going to, I didn't know what to do. So, but I just kept walking, and I think they were just playing, like wrestling. But I thought, well, if they have cameras. I was thinking to myself, I know they have cameras, because I saw that on Hayes Road. But I thought maybe after school hours, because there's a lot of kids now walking, maybe they could have more security, because I sort of felt uncomfortable. I locked my purse. I know they have that thing about people stealing. I know, stealing that happened when people lock their purses in the car, but they didn't want to carry their purse. I was just going to see the whole new park. But I thought, this is weird. So I just thought, wow, why, I know there's the sheriff's station's right there, but I thought maybe they could have more security after school hours, because maybe that's the time they start getting in trouble. And I saw there wasn't a fight out of it, so I just let it go, because I thought there's cameras, and they're going to catch it. So, anyway.
Well, the right person is here, and actually we work with our community partners, and I'm sure we'll be talking again more about, we are constantly talking about how we can continue to mitigate the risk of things happening, and also how do we work together to ensure that we're communicating if there are situations happening. Yes, right behind you.
I've had this question since I went to school. I know you're vetting different technology of what would be most appropriate for school district.
problems are usually a mental health issue, but wouldn't those detectors eliminate so many of the instances that have occurred recently?
So the answer is yes and no. And that's one of those, that's also one of those unfortunate false realities, right? And I say that very respectfully, not that we're looking at many things, including, because detectives are changing significantly now. Than the traditional one where one person at a time, and it takes 5 hours to get 500 people in. And so that's a piece of it. So yes, and I think that's where we're trying to unpack statistically what has proven and what hasn't, right? And so when you think about our buildings, when you think about right now, our facilities are community use facilities. We have if you go to the green or the white gym, you have tons of kids playing sports. When the weather gets nasty, we have every youth group come in and use our facilities. And so one of the things, so you say that, okay, well, you open wide open one time and close another time. And so that's why we don't want to give people false sense of, oh, if we have this one thing, no one else has to do anything else. It's many things that we're trying to do, including the things that we're talking about here, including some of the other options we're looking to try to do, the detection piece of it. So it's not a disagreement with what you're saying. It's a piece about how do we look in a very comprehensive way and not giving us SROs a perfect example. When we brought SROs on board, we didn't want people to say, okay, I don't have to do any safety now. They have all the safety covered. No, they don't. They're probably more for response than anything else, right? Immediacy of response to anything else. And so yes, and so we're looking at even different imagery devices are coming out now that's really changing the complexion of that, but we're still battling, and these guys know that people have weapons that's not made of metal, they're detected now. So it's kind of like one of those kind of things where how do we make sure we balance all those things at the same time, right? And try to take reasonable safeguards, recognizing it's an evolving process. And so you're right, it's the age-old thing. Why don't we do this one thing and solve everything? It won't, because we have data that shows that places, metal detectors, how many things still happen. And on the same note, the thing that we're trying to bank on, and it's not even being idealistic, is fundamentally we know that when we have strong relationships, we minimize a lot of things from happening within our schools and community. And that's also proven out in research over the years as well. So yes, those are kind of things, back to your hardening question, that we kind of look at a lot of things and say, is this the best use? Is this the best thing or not the best thing? How do we do certain other things as we move forward? So as technology change, you'll be surprised some of the things that we may have to do or will be doing as a school system.
So we have a question here, and then we'll go back there, over here, and then back to the middle.
Yeah, I just wonder, are there conversations about expanding the resource officers? Because
We just expanded recently, and we're assessing how effective right now. The three of them back there. Yes, that's our newest one. Shake, he raised his hand. Former Shen grad, I gave him his high school diploma. I feel like an old man. So yes, we just recently, and we're assessing the effectiveness of those that we have now. The beautiful thing about it, Mr. Barrett pointed out, we have the state police barracks there, so we're constant. I mean, on any given time, you have state police, sheriff driving through not only the campus, but off-campus sites. And so that's the benefit we have of these partnerships, that we always have that additional presence. With that, additionally, we hire other staff within buildings that's not necessarily law enforcement, but designed to address potential safety issues as well.
And we have a security system as a district, 24/7.
Yep, our campus security.
We have our campus security also. Back,
do they go on? Sorry, do they go off campus?
Yes, yeah. Any of our school property.
Yeah, any of our properties in the back there. Yep.
Well, first, I just want to say that basically I attended all three of your safety, and they've been awesome. So I just hope that you continue it, and I don't know if this will be a continued series, but I think you should, because this is the most that have arrived.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think we just need to spread the word, and I think all our panelists from the beginning have been amazing. So I just want to say thank you. I hope hopefully we will get a full packed house for future ones, and also all of our, things are changing constantly. I mean, we know that there's one thing that's constantly changing, so keeping it transparent to what you have as much as you can has been wonderful, and we appreciate it. And also, if anyone ever needs some really good cybersecurity info, your FBI agent, one of your agents, I'm not gonna say her name, in Albany, helped us with our 3 cybersecurity badges for Girl Scouts, and she was amazing. We could have talked with her for 3-4 hours. So if anyone ever has an organization, they're a great resource and knowledgeable, and obviously.
So if you call the FBI, you can ask for Sam Balterson.
She was great.
Thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it, and thank you for being here as well as everyone else. I really do appreciate that.
So I can see that you put a lot of effort and hard work in developing a safe environment in the school, but it seems like it's kind of you alone came up with it, and I just wonder if these plans were actually vetted by professionals, like by FBI guys.
Yeah.
So Becky, it sounds like to me that we just found another member of our SAVE committee. No. So actually, one of the things that and Becky, we claim ignorance. And that's why, when I say that, we claim ignorance, so we force ourselves to tap into experts. So we have a safety committee that the gentleman alluded to, 2000 when the state came out that we had to have a SAVE plan. And our SAVE committee is made up of sheriff, state police, first responders, all these folks. We have, not necessarily these 2 gentlemen here, at different points we've had Homeland Security, we use the CIA threat assessment document. We've had the FBI come in and give us intel on school shooting patterns and what are the things that they have learned from school shooting, and we have so a lot of that information. We mentioned the cybersecurity. We have our IMS, Information Management Services folks right now. We get intel from the FBI. When they see something that's be a hacking thing or a phishing thing or certain, they send us, and our folks look at that from that standpoint as well. Some of the background that we use to monitor, and I don't want to sound like Big Brother, but we have a lot of technology and we need to monitor what people do and certain buzzwords. A lot of that came from, again, from some of the folks out here from the cybersecurity pieces that these are some of the best things for schools, and here's the best application. So long and short answer to your question is yes, and that's the reason why I said before, if there are people sitting out here that we might know, you may know something that we don't know you, and you could be a resource, please feel free to reach out, because we don't apologize at all for trying to get the best information to put together the most comprehensive plan. And so, yeah, absolutely. Becky is the conductor, right, of the orchestra, but all these are the people who play specific things, that we try to bring them all together so things flow. And so our SAVE meeting, how many people have on the committee, Becky?
A lot. 25, 30 people. At any given time, people come and go, but we have a huge SAVE committee.
Yeah. So again, I know we're going to wrap up here in a second, but it's more of a plea. And one, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, because about the SAVE, this committee, it's a lot of work. These folks are spending a lot of time. I know these guys they were saying that this is like their 3rd shift now, because today they've been in the school mode of talking about, because the whole swatting thing just consumed the nation, to be quite frank with you, where this whole swatting, shutting down schools across the country. And so I say that because, yes, we build these venues, these summits, and we hope that quite frankly, we have the problem of having to go to a larger venue because it's overcrowded. The reality of it is it's not the case. However, the reality of it is every parent has the same concern. And the parents who are not here have the same concerns. And we also have our circles of neighbors and friends within our community. So if nothing else, I'm just asking, the homework, right, is to go back and talk to some folks in your neighborhood or your circle of friends, and talk about tonight, and talk about what can we do, how can we talk to our kids. Because at the end of the day, kids are going to talk to kids. And if you don't think you're equipped or comfortable to talk to kids, as I said before, reach out to us. Because if it's not our folks can help you, we have those resources. But we have to be intentional about building that solid network around our kids. And we can't wait till something happens and then we all have an overreaction. Let's have the reaction now, a measured reaction, to avoid the need to have that overreaction. And so certainly I hope that you could, if everyone leave out of here, think about it, the math, it multiplies very fast. multiplies very fast. And we just need to start having those conversations when we're not reacting to a crisis. It's important for us to do that. So please, if there's no other takeaway, start having a conversation with your kids. Start having those conversations with your friends, family, relatives, neighbors, whatever the situation might be, and you'll be astonished how quickly this becomes the conversation that we as a community, we value the safety of our children. We value the safety of our children. And we're not going to be naive enough to think that bad things cannot happen. And that's why we take all these steps to try to mitigate those situations as much as we possibly can. So hopefully people walk away with that piece of it, that there's a comfort, that we're constantly focused on that, and collectively we can be better as a result of us being intentional in our efforts. So please, if you walk away with that, nothing else, that'd be great. And if you have some ideas or resources, we'd be more than happy to take your ideas and tap into some resources that you may be aware of that we might not be aware of. So again, Becky, thank you.
Thank you. We have one last question, and then I just have a couple quick announcements, and then we'll conclude the evening.
Okay, this doesn't have to be a question that we actually discuss now, because you're going to have, Shannon has a meeting at the library later this week.
Yep, that's I'm going to talk about that.
But one of the side effects of all of the planning and the drills and everything for safety is that our kids can become incredibly anxious and worried and scared. And that has happened, it is happening, it is a real problem. And it needs to be balanced between having them prepared, but having them also feel safe and able to carry on without looking over their shoulders all the time. So I just want to emphasize that there's another meeting later this
well, I'll explain. So that's a great point that you bring up, and absolutely, as we said, we do debrief after, we do talk about it before, we do allow opportunity. I think Dr. Robinson mentioned it, I think even some of our panel members, I think even Ron mentioned it. You're 100% correct, there's got to be a balance, and we do have to provide opportunity for students to express their feelings, and that's why it's important, we're in it together. This is great because you're hearing the message, you're hearing some of what we're doing, and you can go home and reinforce that, and hopefully that message continues to get out because we are in it together. The event you're talking about is Real Talk, Coping with Stress and Anxiety, a Post-COVID World. Thursday night, April 20th this week. Our CAP teens, Becca's here, oversees the CAP teens. It's Captain and our students here at Shen who put on the event, and we partner to try to make the event one that's very purposeful and addressing a hot topic of the year, basically. So very, very appropriate topic at the library at 6 o'clock on Thursday night this week. The other thing I did want to mention is that we also have Jaden's Trauma Track fundraiser event, which in collaboration with Saratoga Center for the Family, as well as our district's Health and Wellness Committee, we put this event on, and it's really talking about walking for better health and bringing awareness to child abuse. And then the last thing, when we talk about engagement, family engagement, parent engagement, we are really committed as a whole system to engaging parents in conversation, engaging our students, and how can we increase that. And we are actually meeting with new families to the district. We've sent invitation to all of our new families who are brand new to the district to talk about how can we do things better, how can we help bring you into Shen and engage them more into the school system as a whole. The last thing I want to mention is the school budget vote. That's coming up, and Dr. Robinson, if you just
go ahead. You're doing a wonderful job.
Tuesday, it was on the screen there. Tuesday, May 16th is the school budget vote. Please make sure that you get out and vote. Please make sure you tell your neighbors, tell your friends. We need people to come out and vote. Again, I really truly appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you so much to our panel members. I know we went conversation is important. And again, thank you everyone for coming.
Appreciate it. So you have kids here?
Yes.